Greetings. Chapter 2 focuses on the hate debate, constitutional and policy problems. So we see that there is really a lot of legal issues that we can discuss and analyze, not only in this chapter but throughout the course. The author starts by talking about hate crime laws and the Constitution. And so one of the problems, of course, is that hate crime laws are laws in which the motive is an element of the crime. And your author does a good job also of differentiating motive versus intent. But the big problem with motive is the subjectivity of it. And some say that punishing someone's motive is against the First Amendment's protections of speech and association. And in other words, the big question asked here in the critique of hate crime laws are hate crimes thought crimes? And so the argument against hate crimes follow with some discussion that hate crimes might be unconstitutional. And others, of course, argue that hate crimes are constitutional. So you can see the debate there, looking a lot at freedom of thought and also looking at considering motive as an element of the crime. And some argue, of course, that we have to figure out how to analyze motive. In other words, how do we know that hate toward a particular person or group based on a particular category was indeed, the motivation to commit the crime. Secondly, there's the question, do hate crime laws have a chilling effect? And that when we try to figure out the motive, we often will use, as your author points out, circumstantial evidence. For example, that there's no other motive that we can find, and that the defendant stated some animosity toward the person based on affiliation of that person at the time or around the time of the crime, and also that the defendant was associated with some type of hate group. So you can see how we can run into problems there. And so do we have these constitutional issues to address adequately? For example, the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause and 14th Amendment Due Process Clause. So you can look at the constitutional debate and issues in greater detail in the chapter. But I think one of the big things, again, is the problem of motive and how that relates to constitutional issues. Also, which groups should be protected? This gets into a big debate as well. And, for example, some states protect sexual orientation, and some states protect gender, and some states don't. And so there's debate about these scenarios. And so you can read about those that are in favor and those that are not of including sexual orientation in hate crime laws, and also including gender in hate crime laws. Additionally, transgender identity is brought into the discussion. So is homelessness, and so is police and emergency personnel. And so there are some states that include transgender status as a protected category, and as well as states that include homelessness, and also states that include police and emergency personnel. Kind of what would be referred to here maybe as the Blue Lives Matter legislation. And so there's a lot of debate about that as well. Now, factors that affect states' decisions about which groups to protect has been researched, and some of those factors include economic, political, and socio-demographic factors within a state, as well as the behaviors or activities or laws in neighboring states. And so one finding is that states that waited longer to enact the hate crime laws, as your author points out, tended to protect more categories. Also, social movements and activists may play an important role in determining which groups will be protected under the hate crime laws. Identifying and prosecuting hate crimes is also an area of discussion as it relates to legal aspects as well as investigatory and identification aspects as well. So here your author looks at the victim's reporting of hate crimes, and many victims of hate crimes do not report to law enforcement professionals for numerous reasons. For example, they may lack the knowledge about what a hate crime actually would be defined as. They also may fear retaliation from the perpetrator. They may be shamed by the attack, that they may fear being exposed in a variety of cases, and they may lack the language to adequately report the hate crime. So there's a lot of different features here, and there's been some interventions. For example, the California Attorney General Civil Rights Commission on Hate Crimes with recommendations, for example, for having toll-free hotlines for reporting crimes, and then additional training and resources to law enforcement agencies and educational institutions, and also focus on prevention and better response. There's also a section on police responses to hate crimes and some of the barriers that a victim might face, and also some of the problems that may occur along the criminal justice process. For example, a police officer may not interpret that a hate crime occurred, and a police officer may not have the training to identify a hate crime in that particular scenario. And this, of course, is going to differ officer to officer and agency to agency. One of the things I'm seeing more of is more training. And of course, the big problem for police officers is that they get more and more and more and more training as things become more and more and more complex. Maybe some of you can remember the days in criminal justice before computer crimes. That for years and years and years, when I was a teenager and young adult, I didn't have to worry about cybercrime, primarily because I didn't have a computer. And also there's a lot more training on identifying mental disorder and risk, and on problem solving. And so sometimes we can additionally put hate crime training into this as well. One of the things I would say, of course, is that because we have this class, and this is the first time this class is being offered in our department, and so I'm very, very happy to be able to teach a course on hate crimes. Of course, some of you may say, well, Mark, you've been around the university, 29 years now, teaching? Well, why didn't you do that 28 years ago? 20 years ago, 10 years ago, last year? And I don't have a short answer for you right now, but a lot of factors go into that, and it's been something that's been on my mind for a long time. And of course, there's only so many training sessions a police officer can take, and there's only so many courses an educational institution can offer. And so also, we find clearance rates tend to be low for hate crimes, and there have been many attempts and initiatives to improve police reporting of hate crimes. For example, some police departments have specialized units that focus on hate crimes, or they have task forces, and they have special procedures for handling hate crimes, and they have, again, additional training. And so, and I think that may be something that occurs when someone becomes a police officer, that they get the training maybe on the job and in that particular agency. Certainly, anyone in law enforcement who is taking this course, or anyone taking this course, I congratulate you for wanting to gain additional information and knowledge about this topic. And then prosecuting hate crimes can be problematic as well. The prosecutor may have difficulty understanding hate crime and may not have experience in prosecuting hate crimes, and may focus more on the actual initial charge prior to a hate crime being assessed or determined. For example, someone's battered, and they say, well, battery, but then they say, well, it was also a hate crime, and so, well, battery, and in the situation of a hate crime, are they going to go ahead and use that, or are they going to prosecute only on the battery? And so you get into the situation of dealing with judges and juries and defense attorneys and so on, and that can have some impact on the prosecution. Then your author has a fascinating section on the paradoxical effects of hate crime laws, and asks kind of these questions: do hate crime laws inspire complacency among policymakers? That, in other words, policymakers, politicians get some hate crime laws enacted and say, okay, we've done our job, we're done. Look, we did this. It also may appear to be tough on crime, but of course we want to know how things play out in the actual field and in the practice of understanding, identifying, and prosecuting and punishing hate crimes. Also, the question about do hate crime laws create resentment of minorities or particular groups? And so there's some debate about that as well. And do hate crime laws disempower minority groups? And so that question has been asked as well. Do hate crime laws increase prejudice? And again, you see some different perspectives on that scenario as well. So again, I just touched on a few issues related to the constitutional and legal and investigatory and prosecution aspects of hate crimes, and you'll find a lot more details in your text. And this wraps up this video.